And then I've got to remember how to share my screen. All right, this meeting is related to an application for US EPA Brownfield cleanup funds that the Land Bank is planning to submit next month. If we would like to make our draft application available for everyone to review and comment on, and in that application, we're also including an analysis of brownfield cleanup alternatives for the two sites, letting you know what kinds of cleanup options are being considered and why one over the other seems to be a better option for that site. So you can review those draft materials, any of those documents, and provide your feedback. We're also going to be posting this video on our website so people can watch and then later ask questions and pose comments if they would like to do so. Any of those questions or comments or a request to review the documents should be emailed to us at info@syracuselandbank.org, and that's right here shown on this slide, info@syracuselandbank.org. Before I start, just a little bit of information about the Land Bank. We are a local public authority created to deal with vacant and abandoned properties. The vast majority of the properties we address are like single and two-family homes. They're relatively simple. Brownfields are much more complicated. So we are just starting to get involved in brownfield remediation in the past few years. And these will be the first two sites that we're applying to do significant cleanup on. So what is a brownfield? According to the EPA, it's a property where redevelopment is either complicated by the presence or potential presence of a hazardous substance, pollutant, or contaminant. So even just kind of not knowing if a site is contaminated can make it a brownfield if it's discouraging people from redeveloping that site. And that's what we have found with a lot of the properties that the city has foreclosed on and conveyed to us. It's a lack of information that is scaring potential developers away from commercial sites that may or may not still have underground fuel tanks or soil contamination. So to address that lack of information, we have applied in the past for assessment grants, and we've successfully been awarded 2 assessment grants. Those fund testing. They don't fund the actual remediation. So we can use that money for phase 1 and 2 environmental site assessments. Phase 1 is really just doing research on what used to happen at the property, what was it used for, to get a sense of whether or not there is a high level of risk that there might be contamination present. A phase 2 takes it a step further and actually does sampling and testing. It might be sampling building materials like lead paint or asbestos. It could be sampling groundwater, soil, or doing air quality testing. And then those samples get sent to a lab. And that will give us real data to show whether or not any cleanup is needed. We can also use those assessment grants for just straight hazardous building materials testing, like for lead and asbestos. And we can use them to do planning for how to clean up a site. So the analysis of brownfield cleanup alternatives, where you can look at what are the options to address a contaminated site and pick the best option, and the preparation of cleanup grant applications. And that's what we're here to discuss tonight, is a cleanup grant application. So we've tested quite a few properties so far with our 2 assessment grants. And after we do that initial testing, it can turn out a variety of different ways. Sometimes we do that testing and we find out that the site's really not dirty. And so we've eliminated that unknown that was previously scaring away developers and made it attractive for somebody to come in and redevelop the site just by eliminating the uncertainty. Sometimes we find that there is some contamination, but it's not so bad that it can't be addressed by a private developer. New York State has something called the New York State Brownfield Tax Credit that a lot of developers find attractive, and just that little bit of extra financial incentive might make it reasonable for them to deal with the cleanup and then proceed with redevelopment because they're enticed by this New York State tax credit. In other cases, we've found that there's just a few small issues that we can actually address out of pocket with land bank funds. We've a few times done that to remove underground fuel tanks. But in a handful of cases, we have found that the sites are extremely contaminated, and even the brownfield tax credit isn't enough of an incentive to get a private buyer to address it. And we certainly don't have the resources to address it out of pocket. And so that's the type of project where we actually need to go apply for grant funding to do the cleanup, whether it be New York State grant funding or federal grant funding. The New York State program that funds local governments to do this type of cleanup work has not been funded in many years. So really this EPA cleanup grant is the only opportunity that we can find that'll help us clean up sites like this. So the two we are looking at are 917 Montgomery Street and 541 Seymour Street. And collectively, we think that it's going to take about $4 million to clean up both of those sites. The vast majority of that is for 541 Seymour. You'll see why in a moment. And about 13% of that would be for 917 Montgomery. So here's 917 Montgomery. It's a former auto body repair shop at the corner of Burt and Montgomery. It's right next to Hops Memorial Church. It's in the East Adams neighborhood, which you may have seen in the news recently got a Choice Neighborhoods Initiative grant from HUD, $50 million to go towards the project that Blueprint 15, the City of Syracuse, and the Housing Authority are working on right now to redevelop older Housing Authority buildings, to turn those into new high-quality housing, to try to make the neighborhood more mixed income, add more employment opportunities to the neighborhood, more high-quality educational options, and just to generally revitalize the neighborhood and bring in amenities that will improve quality of life for people that live there. So there's a lot of exciting things happening right here, but there's also a lot of brownfield sites. This area was previously zoned industrial, and there's a lot of former manufacturing buildings in the area, and then like this property that was used for auto repair. It is zoned MX2, so it can be reused for commercial purposes. And in our discussions with Blueprint 15, we kind of envision it being used for something like office or a salon, maybe retail or a restaurant. It's about 5,500 square feet and a single story on 0.2 acres. And it has large garage doors now from when it used to be an auto repair shop. And you can kind of envision those being opened up when the weather's good for either a store or a restaurant to kind of have that indoor-outdoor seating. So we hope that we'll see it revitalized in that way. Before we can get there, though, you can see that there's a whole lot of contamination, most of which I frankly can't pronounce because I don't come from a science background. But a lot of this is soil contamination underneath the two parking areas. And there's also one underground fuel tank that is next to the building. And there is lead paint and asbestos-containing materials in the building. So our consultants looked at 3 alternatives for cleanup. Option 1 is to do nothing, which is obviously not acceptable. We wouldn't be able to return the property to productive use, and that's what our mission is. Option 2, they're calling limited excavation with a cover system and groundwater treatment and hazardous building material abatement. So that would remove all of the asbestos and lead from the building. We would remove any contaminated soils and then put down a clean layer of 2 feet of clean soil to contain anything underneath so that people that are using the site in the future won't actually be touching any contaminated soil. Groundwater treatment would be chemically treating the groundwater to address anything that has leached from the soil into the groundwater. Option 3 would be to go above and beyond that and to clean it up to an even higher standard. When you're doing environmental remediation, there are standards that have to be met for soil remediation, soil cleanup objectives. They determine how clean a site has to be for various uses. So if you're just going to reuse it for another industrial purpose, you have to clean it up, but just enough. If you're going to use it for commercial or retail, there's going to be more people coming on and off of the site. It has to be a little cleaner. If it's going to be multifamily homes, it's got to be a little cleaner than that because people are going to live there and be spending even more time on the property. And if it's single family homes and there's a lot of people spending time outside in their yards, that is the cleanest standard that you have to meet. So this alternative 3 is if we were to get to that highest level where it could be used for anything up to and including single family homes, it's just more than we need to do for this site. It would be about 40% more expensive to do. And we don't think that this site is suitable for single family home development anyway. So we think that we can do something more cost effective and clean it up to the commercial standard and follow alternative number 2. So this is the plan for alternative number 2. It would include, like I said, hazardous building materials abatement, removal of the underground storage tank, limited removal of contaminated soils, construction of a cover system. Like I said, it'll be a layer that caps anything that's contaminated. So when you're at the surface, you're only interacting with clean soils, groundwater treatment, and then vapor mitigation if necessary. So if there are still any vapors from that contamination that are infiltrating into the building and affecting the indoor air quality, we would install something that's very similar to a radon mitigation system to keep that indoor air quality clean and healthy. So that is the first building. The next building that we're looking at is 541 Seymour Street. You may know it as the Consolidated Industries Building. I'm showing here what it looks like from Seymour and then also what it looks like from Shawnered because it does extend all the way through the block. You can see it's kind of an unusual property, big industrial property right here in the middle of what's mostly a residential neighborhood. It's mostly surrounded by typical Syracuse houses, anything from 1 to 3 family homes, 2 stories, detached, wood frame. And you can see here the site is quite large. It is in the near West Side neighborhood. It's zoned R5, which would allow for pretty dense multifamily development. You could hypothetically pull a permit here to build a large apartment building, but we think that that would be kind of out of scale with everything that's around it, and it would make more sense to try to make it fit into the neighborhood. And so we think it would make sense to do 2 to 4 family homes that kind of look like the neighboring homes, that are about the same size and scale. Once this building is demolished, we can divide the lot up into normal sized building parcels, and we believe we can fit about 15 new homes here. That would be 15 buildings. It would be 30 or more units. It's 1.6 acres. It's currently a 39,000 square foot building. It's pretty big. It's single story, and it was a former manufacturing facility. It's extremely deteriorated, and we don't think that it can be cost effectively renovated. And furthermore, we think we need to remove the building so that we can get at the contaminated soil that's underneath the concrete slab it sits on. So again, this is the types of contamination that they found when they were testing the building. It's full of asbestos-containing material. The building itself needs to be demolished and properly disposed of. And then you can see there's a variety of different types of contamination in the soil underneath the foundation. And we think there may be some infiltration into the groundwater as well. So again, we looked at 3 options. Option 2, that we're looking at here is about $3.3 million. That would cover the demolition, and we would remove the slab, remove a layer of contaminated soil, and then bring in a layer of clean fill that would sit on top of that, so that the site can be walked on, and it would, you'd only be touching clean soil. That is the standard for multifamily houses. So if we were to build 2 to 4 unit houses, this would meet that standard and meet those criteria. If you wanted it to be cleaned up to a level where you could build single family homes, our consultant is estimating it would be about an $8.6 million cleanup. That's more than double, but it's also more than we could probably get from an EPA cleanup grant. So we think pursuing option 2 is really the only viable way that we can get the site cleaned up and redeveloped to create new housing. And this would be the plan for option 2, to abate the hazardous building materials, limited removal of contaminated soils, construction of a soil cover treatment system, and a groundwater treatment system. So we have the full draft application available for review. You can see the nature of the contamination that is there, what our plans are to remove it, and what our post-remediation plans are to redevelop these sites. You're welcome to view a copy of that. You can, like I said, email us at info@syracuselandbank.org, and we will give you copies of all these documents. And you're welcome to send back comments or questions. We will respond to every single one of those comments or questions in writing and include all of that in our application to the EPA. So you will get an answer to your question. And we just need you to submit that by November 6th so that we have enough time to review them, make any necessary edits to the application, and get it all packaged up and submitted to the EPA by the following week. So we're going to be posting this video on our website along with copies of these slides. So I hope that you share it with your friends and that people get an idea about what's being planned in their neighborhoods. Chevelle, is there anything that you think we should add? You're muted though.
Oh, goodness.
There we go. I can hear you now.
Okay. No, I think that was a good presentation.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate you taking the time to join.
Okay, no problem.
All right. You have a good evening.
Okay, you too. See you tomorrow.
Bye-bye.